CEO hired him to guard the lot, not knowing he once owned the land the factory was built on. 47 cars sat in the overflow lot off Meridian Street the morning it happened. Security cameras, chain link fence, a blue uniformed man standing at the east gate with a thermos and a clipboard. His name badge said Mason. His jacket had a patch on the left sleeve, where someone had ironed over an old tear. Behind him, tucked against the guard booth, a 6-year-old girl sat on an upturned milk crate, holding a small gray rabbit with one ear longer than the other. The rabbit's name was Cog. She had named it herself 2 years ago, when she was still learning what words meant. The woman in the silver sedan rolled down her window without stopping. She did not look at Mason directly. She looked at the lot behind him, then at her phone, then somewhere past his left shoulder. She said the lot was supposed to be cleared for executive arrivals. She said it as though she were reading from a memo. She said Mason should have been notified. Mason said he had not been notified. She finally looked at him. There was a pause, the kind that contains a decision being made. Then she said, very quietly, that perhaps this was not the right position for someone who needed things explained twice. She rolled her window up. The sedan moved past him into the reserved section. Her name was Serena Vance, 31 years old, 16 months into her role as CEO of Halverson Industrial. She had not yet learned what the land under her feet had once cost, or who had sold it, or why he was standing at her gate with a thermos and a clipboard instead of sitting in the office that bore his grandfather's name. Stay with this one. It earns it. Her father had built Halverson from a single stamping press and a lease agreement on 3 acres of flat ground out past the rail yard. That was 1,971. By 1989, the plant employed 312 people. By 2004, when a man named Carter Holt joined the board as a financial advisor, the company employed 842. Carter Holt had silver hair and a Philippe Patek watch, and a way of entering rooms that made other men feel like they were taking up too much space. Mason Doyle had been working security at the Halverson lot for 11 weeks. Before that, he had been working landscaping for a municipal contractor in Caldwell. Before that, he had been doing maintenance at a community pool that closed for winter. Before that, he had been trying to get his daughter enrolled in 2nd grade and failing to sleep past 4 a.m. and learning to make braided bread because Lily had seen a picture in a book and asked him if they could eat it. Before all of that, he had been something else entirely. The thermos on his clipboard had a small dent on the left side from a fall it had taken 2 years ago. His wife, Nora, had bought it at a gas station outside of Fort Benning. She had written his initials on the bottom in marker, M.D. The marker had faded to the point where, if you weren't looking for it, you might not see it at all. Lily pressed Cog's left ear flat against the rabbit's head and watched her father write something on his clipboard. She asked him what he was writing. He said he was writing down the time. She thought about this. Then she asked him why people always needed to know the time. He looked at her. He said, "That was an excellent question." Serena Vance had been awake since 5:17 that morning. She had a briefing at 7 and a board presentation at 10 and a vendor negotiation at 2, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, Carter Holt had texted her that they needed to talk before the board meeting. No explanation. Just those words. She had read the message 4 times in the car and still could not determine whether it was an offer of help or a threat delivered politely. She was new enough to this job to still confuse the two. Halverson's main building was a converted stamping plant, 4 stories of reinforced concrete and updated glass, the kind of renovation that costs more than the original construction. The lobby had the original floor from 1971, sealed and preserved, a kind of institutional pride that Serena had inherited, along with the spreadsheets and the org chart and the employee benefit structure that had been grandfathered in from an agreement she had not been party to. That agreement, as it turned out, was one of 3 documents she did not know existed. Carter Holt knew about all 3. He was in her office when she arrived. He was looking out the window at the lot. He said good morning without turning around. He said the lot situation needed to be addressed before the board members arrived. He said the optics of executives parking behind a man with a milk crate for a desk were not ideal. Serena said she had already spoken to the security contractor. Carter turned then. He smiled. He said good. The smile was the kind that means something other than what it looks like. At 8:44 inches the morning, Lily dropped Cog on the asphalt next to the guard booth. Not dropped, she set him down deliberately, standing him upright with his one long ear flopped over, and told him he needed to stand guard while she used the bathroom in the break room. Mason watched her walk up the path to the side entrance. She had his eyes, she had Nora's posture, the way she put her heels down first instead of her toes. He picked Cog up and set him on the clipboard. He had been doing security work since August. He had taken the job because the hours were manageable, and because the lot was 2.5 miles from Lily's school, and because it paid $19 an hour, which was not enough, but was sufficient. He did not take it because he had no other options. He had other options. He had taken it because it was the one that allowed him to bring Lily on days when her after-school program was closed, and those days had been happening more and more since the school cut its budget in March. He had not told anyone at Halverson Industrial about his previous employment history. He had not lied about it either. The application form asked for the previous 3 years. He had filled in the previous 3 years. The 3 years before that were a different kind of document entirely. Before the maintenance work and the landscaping and the pool closure, Mason Doyle had spent 8 years doing work that did not appear on any public record. The work had taken him to places with poor roads and no electricity, and long periods of waiting, followed by very short periods in which waiting was no longer possible. He had been good at it. He had been, according to the men who had evaluated him, exceptionally good at it, calm under pressure, technically precise, capable of making decisions in conditions that caused other people to stop making decisions altogether. He left when Lily was born. That had been the agreement he'd made with Nora, and it was not a difficult agreement to keep. She had been worth leaving for. Lily had been worth leaving for. The life they built together in the small house off Keller Road had been, without qualification, the best thing he had ever participated in. Nora had been a structural engineer. She had worked for a small firm that did bridge assessments for the county, and she had a gift for looking at things other people had built and understanding immediately where the load was being distributed incorrectly. She had that gift in her work, and she had it in other things too. She had looked at Mason the first time they met and said something that he did not fully understand until years later, which was, "You carry more than you let anyone see." She died on a Tuesday in February. Not a car accident, though that was easier to say sometimes. An aneurysm, without warning, in the middle of an otherwise ordinary afternoon. Lily had been 4 years old. She had been playing with Cog, not yet named Cog, still just the gray rabbit from the bottom of her toy bin on the living room floor. Mason had driven home from a meeting with a landscape contractor and found the door unlocked, and Lily sitting quietly at the kitchen table with Cog in her lap, waiting the way children wait when they understand that something has changed but cannot yet name what it is. He did not talk about Nora often, not because it was too much, exactly, more because the right words for it had not yet arrived, and in the meantime, saying the wrong ones felt like a disservice to her. There was a sketchbook in the drawer beside his bed, her handwriting on the cover in green pen. He had not opened it in 8 months. He would, he thought, just not yet. An older man named Raymond Fuentes ran the morning shift at the guardhouse on the north side of the property. He had been with Halverson for 22 years. He and Mason took their coffee breaks at the same time on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Raymond had a habit of talking while Mason listened, which suited them both. Raymond had said the 3rd week they worked together that Mason reminded him of someone he used to know. He did not say who. He stirred his coffee and let it sit there and talked about something else. Mason had not asked. Lily came back from the break room with 2 packets of crackers she had gotten from the vending machine. She gave one to Mason. She sat down on the milk crate and put Cog in her lap and began eating with the focused seriousness of someone conducting an experiment. It was 2 inches the morning. In 41 minutes, everything in the lot would change. The board members arrived in 3 cars, 2 black SUVs and 1 rental. 9 people in total, 5 of whom Mason had seen before, and 4 of whom he had not. The ones he had not seen carried themselves differently, quieter, more deliberate. The particular stillness of people who were used to rooms going quiet when they entered. One of them paused at the east gate. His name was Werner Bowman. He was 64. He had spent 30 years at a defense consultancy before transitioning to private equity, and before that, he had served 2 terms as a senior procurement officer for a branch of the Army that did not advertise its activities. He was not a large man. He had small hands and reading glasses on a cord around his neck, and the kind of face that had once been severe and had softened only slightly with age, like iron left outside for a long time. He looked at Mason. Mason looked at him. It was not the first time they had seen each other. It was not the look of strangers. Werner Bowman adjusted his glasses and walked past and did not say a word. Lily looked up at Mason. She asked who that man was. Mason said he was someone from a long time ago. She pressed Cog against her chest and thought about this. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the 4th floor conference room. Carter Holt had arranged the agenda. 3 items: quarterly performance, capital reallocation, and what the summary slide described as a legacy land audit. The 3rd item had been added 2 days prior. Serena had not been told what it contained. At 9:43, Carter's assistant brought a folder to the conference room and placed it at the head of the table where Serena sat. The folder was labeled Meridian Parcel Historical Title Chain. Serena opened it. She read the first page. She read it a second time. Then she closed it and sat very still for a moment, looking at the window. The documents inside the folder were real. She could tell they were real. They had the weight of things that had been notarized and filed and ignored for a long time, the kind of paper that had lived in a drawer and then a box and then a storage facility, and had finally come to the surface not because someone went looking, but because someone had arranged for it to be found. What she did not know yet was that the documents inside Carter's folder were not complete. There was a second set, an older set, a set that changed what the first set meant entirely. That second set was in a gray metal lockbox in Raymond Fuentes' truck, because Raymond Fuentes had been holding it for 12 years on behalf of a man who had asked him to keep it safe and had never come back to collect it. Not because he forgot, because for a long time he had not needed it. At 9:47 a.m., the East Gate had a problem. One of the board member SUVs had pulled forward at an angle that blocked the exit for the delivery vehicles coming in off Meridian. The driver had gone inside without resolving it. 2 delivery trucks sat idling. A third was pulling in from the street. Mason radioed the front desk. No answer. He looked at Lily. He said he needed her to stay right here, right where he could see her. She held up Cog. She said Cog would keep watch. He said he knew Cog would. He went to the SUV. The driver had left it in drive, with the parking brake engaged, a habit some drivers had from years of parking on inclines. The combination meant the brake was working against a small amount of forward pressure, which would cause it to slip slowly if left alone long enough. He radioed again. He looked at the angle of the truck. He looked at the 3 vehicles idling behind it. He did not shout. He did not flag anyone down. He went back to the booth, retrieved a set of wheel chocks from the equipment bin, walked back to the SUV, set them precisely, and then went to each of the delivery drivers and rerouted them through the north entrance with directions specific enough that none of them needed to stop and ask twice. The whole thing took 7 minutes. Raymond Fuentes, who had been watching from the north booth, put his coffee down. He picked up his phone and made a call. He said a name. He said the name twice. Then he said, "I think you need to come down here." The 10 a.m. meeting started on time. Carter Holt sat to Serena's right. He had brought his own copy of the Meridian parcel documents and had tabbed them in 3 places. He explained the situation with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it. The Halverson plant, he said, sat on 14 acres. The original lease from 1971 had been converted to a purchase in 1988. The purchase had been straightforward except for a single irregularity in the title chain, a prior claim from a parcel conveyance that had not been fully extinguished in the county records. He said the claim was historical. He said it had no practical standing. He said Halverson's legal team had reviewed it. Werner Bowman, sitting 4 seats down, did not look at Carter. He looked at the folder in front of him and turned one of the pages over very slowly. Serena asked what the prior claim was based on. Carter said it was a family sale that dated back to 1969. He said the family had sold the land willingly. He said the documentation showed a clean transaction. He did not mention that the documentation he had provided was from 1969. He did not mention that there was a document from 1967. The 1967 document was a deed of trust. It had been recorded in the name of a man named Thomas Doyle. Thomas Doyle had sold the 14 acres to the Halverson family in 1969 for what was, at the time, a reasonable price. What the 1967 deed showed, what Carter's folder carefully did not include, was that the original conveyance of the land to Thomas Doyle had come with a reverter clause, a specific, legally recorded reverter clause that stated the land would revert to the Doyle family trust if the purchaser's direct descendants ceased to hold controlling interest in any entity operating on the property. Halverson Industrial had been majority acquired by an outside investor group 14 months ago, 16 months before Mason Doyle came to work at the gate, 2 months before Serena Vance was appointed CEO. The phone call Raymond made at 9:54 a.m. was to a man named Elijah Marsh, who had been a county records clerk for 31 years and had retired 18 months prior to take care of his wife. Elijah had once, in 2012, flagged an anomaly in the Meridian parcel filing for a young attorney who had come asking quiet questions. The young attorney had thanked him and left, and Elijah had not thought about it again until Raymond called. Raymond told him what was happening. Elijah said he had been wondering when this day would come. He said he would be there in 40 minutes. He said to tell Mason not to do anything yet. Raymond walked down to the east gate. Mason was standing at his post. Lily was eating her second packet of crackers and telling Cog about a movie she had seen at school about a fish that got lost. Raymond sat on the bumper of the equipment cart. He said, "Mason, I need to ask you something directly." Mason said, "Go ahead." Raymond said, "Are you Thomas Doyle's grandson?" Mason was quiet for a moment. He looked at the lot. He looked at the main building. He said yes. Raymond nodded slowly. He picked up his coffee. He said he had thought so for a long time. He said Mason looked like him. Not in a way Raymond could describe exactly, just in the way that some people carry the shape of another person in how they hold themselves. Mason did not say anything. Lily looked up at both of them. She was holding Cog against her cheek. She said, "Daddy, who is Thomas Doyle?" Mason said, "He was your great-grandfather, baby." She thought about this. She said, "Did he live here?" Mason said, "He used to own here." At 10:38, the board meeting was still ongoing. Carter had moved to the capital reallocation portion of the agenda. He had not yet gotten to the resolution of the land audit, which his slide described as a corrective filing to be submitted by Halverson's legal team to permanently extinguish the historical claim. Werner Bowman raised his hand. He asked to see the original title documentation from 1967. Carter said the 1967 records were not germane. Werner said he would like to see them anyway. Carter said the legal team had reviewed everything and determined the claim was extinguished. Werner said he was on the board. He said he was asking to see the 1,967 documentation. The room went quiet. Not the quiet of nothing happening. The quiet of a room where everyone has stopped pretending to look at their materials and is now watching two men measure each other without moving. Carter said he did not have the 1,967 records with him. Werner said that was interesting. He stood up. He excused himself. He walked out of the conference room and took the elevator to the lobby. And then he walked through the lobby and out the main entrance and across the lot to the east gate. He stood in front of Mason Doyle. He said, "Your grandfather was a good man." Mason said, "Yes, sir." Werner said, "Do you know what's happening up there?" Mason said, "I have a general idea." Werner said, "Do you have the documents?" Mason looked at Raymond. Raymond went to his truck. Elijah Marsh arrived at 11. 4 inches, a gray Subaru with a parking permit for the county archives hanging from the rearview mirror. He had a leather document case under his arm, the kind with a brass clasp and a combination lock, and he moved with the particular speed of a man who has been waiting a long time to be useful. He shook Mason's hand. He said he was sorry about Nora. He said he had read the obituary and had wanted to reach out, but hadn't known how. Mason said he appreciated that. Elijah set the document case on the hood of Raymond's truck. He unclasped it. Inside, in archival sleeves, were 3 documents. The first was a photocopy of the 1,967 deed of trust. The second was a certified copy of the reverter clause, recorded and stamped by the county recorder's office. The third was a memo from a 2004 title search conducted when Carter Holt joined the Halverson board, in which the title search company noted the existence of the reverter clause and flagged it for the acquiring party. The acquiring party at that time was Carter Holt's advisory firm. The memo had been reviewed, signed, and then filed in a cabinet that was subsequently moved to off-site storage when Carter's firm was merged with a holding company 7 years later. The physical copy had been requested by Elijah Marsh formally and on the record in 2012 and had been provided to him as part of a routine records audit. It had been in his document case ever since. Carter Holt's signature was on the 2004 memo. Carter Holt's firm had known about the reverter clause for 22 years. They had acquired controlling interest in Halverson Industrial, specifically structured in a way that would, if the reverter clause were ever surfaced, appear to extinguish the claim retroactively. It was a very sophisticated arrangement. What it was not, as it turned out, was legal. Werner Bowman put on his reading glasses and went through all 3 documents twice. He did not speak while he read. He turned each page carefully, the way a person does when they are not looking for the thing they expected to find but finding it anyway. He took out his phone and made a call. He said 3 sentences, and then he said, "Thank you," and he hung up. He looked at Mason. He said, "Do you understand what these documents mean?" Mason said, "Yes, sir." Werner said, "The reverter clause is intact. The acquisition 14 months ago triggered it. This land, under the original trust terms, reverts to the Doyle family trust." He paused. He said, "You own the ground this building is standing on." The lot was quiet. Lily had stopped eating her crackers. She was looking at her father. She had Cog pressed against her collarbone with both hands, the way she held him when she was paying close attention to something. Mason did not look triumphant. He did not look surprised. He looked the same way he always looked, as if he were taking in the time and writing it on a clipboard. At 11:21, Werner Bowman walked back into the conference room. He did not sit down. He placed the 3 archival documents on the table in front of Serena Vance. He placed them gently, the way you place something fragile, or something that has been a long time coming. He said, "Carter, I think you need to explain your firm's relationship to the 2004 title memo." Carter looked at the documents. Something moved across his face, not panic, not exactly. Something older and more controlled than panic. The look of a man who has had contingency plans for a long time and is now running through them very quickly and discovering, one by one, that they no longer apply. He said the memo was taken out of context. Werner said, "Your signature is on it." Carter said his firm had disclosed the reverter clause to the Halverson family at the time of the acquisition. Werner said, "Then why is there no corresponding record in the Halverson files? Why was this memo in county storage?" Carter said he would need to speak with his attorney. One of the other board members, a woman named Eleanor Taft, who had been with the board for 9 years and who had spent 12 years before that as a corporate litigator, turned the memo over in her hands. She did not look at Carter. She looked at the routing stamps at the bottom of the page, the small administrative marks that showed which desks a document had passed through before it was filed. She said, "Carter, this was routed to your personal file folder at the time, not to the general acquisition records. It didn't go to the Halverson Family Council. It went directly to you. And it was marked, reviewed, and filed under your personal sign-off." Carter said, "Documents get misfiled. That's not evidence of intent." Eleanor said, "The routing is a system record. It was not a misfiling. Someone chose that folder." Something in Carter's posture shifted not much, but enough. He straightened his jacket. He said he had been with Halverson for 22 years. He said he had contributed substantially to the company's growth and stability. He said this kind of ambush, he used the word ambush, was not a reflection of the professional conduct this board was supposed to uphold. Werner said, "Carter, we're not ambushing you. We're reading a memo you signed." The room had changed in the way rooms change when the outcome of something becomes visible before anyone has announced it. A quiet reordering. 2 board members had their phones on the table in front of them, screens lit. A third was writing in a notebook. No one had asked for notes. No one needed to. Serena had not spoken. She was looking at the documents. She had read the first 2 pages of the deed of trust, and she had stopped. And she was sitting with the particular stillness of someone who has just understood something that changes the shape of everything that came before it. She said, "Carter, when did you arrange for the lot security contractor to bring on Mason Doyle?" The room went quiet. Not a pause, not a beat of consideration, a silence that had a shape to it. Carter said, "I didn't arrange that." Serena looked at him for a long time. She said, "You didn't know he was here." It was not a question. Carter's jaw moved slightly. His hand, which had been flat on the table, curled once and then went still. He said, "I want my attorney present." Werner said, "That's advisable." He picked up his phone and made a second call. When he hung up, he looked at the board members around the table and said that effective immediately, he was requesting a legal hold on all pending filings related to the Meridian parcel, and that the board would need to discuss the implications of the 2004 memo for Carter Holt's ongoing advisory relationship with the company. Carter stood up. He said this was a mischaracterization. No one responded. He said the documents were incomplete. No one responded. He said Werner had no authority to Werner. Bowman looked at him over the top of his reading glasses. He did not raise his voice. He said, "Carter, sit down or leave the room." Carter left the room. He walked to the elevator. The elevator doors closed behind him. 2 board members followed to ensure he did not access the filing room on the 2nd floor. Serena sat at the head of the table for a long moment. She looked at the documents. She looked at her hands. She asked Werner, "How long has he known?" Werner said, 22 years, at minimum." She closed her eyes. She opened them. She said, "I need to go downstairs." She came through the lobby at 11:44. Through the glass doors and down the front steps and across the asphalt lot and to the east gate where Mason Doyle was standing with his thermos and his clipboard. Raymond Fuentes was there. Elijah Marsh was there. Werner Bowman had come down behind her and stood to the side. Lily was sitting on the milk crate with Cog in her lap, watching Serena come across the parking lot. Serena stopped in front of Mason. She said, "I didn't know." Mason said, "I know." She said, "About the documents, about your grandfather, about any of it. I want to be clear about what I'm saying, not that I made a reasonable mistake. I treated you with contempt this morning, in front of your daughter, and I was wrong to do that in every way that a person can be wrong." He did not argue with this. He did not deflect it. He said, "Thank you." She looked at Lily. She looked at Cog, the gray rabbit with the mismatched ears, sitting in the child's arms. She did something then that no one had asked her to do. She crossed the distance between herself and the milk crate, and she crouched down, not bent at the waist, but genuinely crouched, knees to the asphalt, eye level with a 6-year-old girl she had never spoken to. She said, "Hi, what's his name?" Lily looked at her for a moment. She looked at Cog. She held him up so Serena could see him better. She said, "His name is Cog." Serena said, "That's a good name." Lily said, "He keeps things running." Serena Vance, 31 years old, 16 months into the hardest job she had ever held, looked at the child and then looked at Mason and then looked at the building behind her, the 4 floors of reinforced concrete and updated glass, sitting on 14 acres of land that had been, for the last 22 years, quietly, legally, and entirely incorrectly considered to be someone else's. Her eyes were not dry. She did not look away. The formal process took 11 weeks. It was not simple, and it was not ceremonial. It involved 3 attorneys, a county recorder's re-examination, a title insurance claim, and a board vote that went 6-1 in favor of acknowledging the reverter clause. Carter Holt resigned before the vote was taken. He was referred to the state attorney general's office on the recommendation of Werner Bowman and 2 other board members. The referral cited the 2004 memo and a pattern of financial structuring that the board's outside counsel described as constituting deliberate concealment of a known legal encumbrance. Carter's attorney issued a statement. The statement used the phrase "taken out of context" twice and the phrase "my client acted in good faith" 3 times. It did not address the 2004 memo directly. Mason met with Serena twice during those 11 weeks. The first time was at a law office. The second time was at the Halverson building itself, in the lobby, at a table that had been set up near the original 1,971 floor. She had a proposal. She said Halverson was not able to relocate. 842 people worked there. It was not something she could ask them to absorb. She said she understood if Mason wanted to pursue the full legal remedy and she would not obstruct it. He said he wasn't there to close a building. She looked at him. He said his grandfather had sold the land because he believed in what the Halverson family was building. He said he thought that was still worth something. He said what he wanted was his family's name on the original deed restored in the county record, a formal acknowledgement from the Halverson board in writing, and a long-term ground lease structure that reflected fair market terms. She said she could do all of that. He said one more thing. She said, "Name it." He said, "There's a man named Raymond Fuentes who has worked the North Gate for 22 years. He should have a pension plan that reflects that." She was quiet for a moment. She said, "Done." She extended her hand. He shook it. Elijah Marsh framed the restored deed record and gave it to Mason at Christmas. The frame was plain wood. Inside it, behind glass, was a certified copy of the original 1,967 deed of trust, with the name Thomas Doyle in the grantor field and the Halverson family name below it, and at the bottom, a county stamp from the re-examination, dated November of this year, with a notation in blue ink, reverter clause confirmed intact. Title interest restored to Doyle Family Trust. Mason hung it in the kitchen, not in the living room, not somewhere visible from the front door. In the kitchen, where he would see it in the morning when he was making breakfast. Lily asked why he put it there. He said because that was where the important things went. She thought about this while she ate her toast. Cog was sitting on the counter next to the toaster, his mismatched ears catching the light from the window. She had started keeping him on the counter in the mornings because, she explained, he liked to watch the birds in the yard. She picked up her glass of orange juice. She looked at the framed deed on the wall. She looked at her father. She said, "Daddy, did we always own this?" He looked at the frame. He looked at her. He said, "In the way that matters." She nodded. She went back to her toast. She tore off a piece and set it on the counter next to Cog in case he wanted some. Outside, the birds moved in the yard. The morning light came through at the angle it always came through at this time of year. Mason poured himself a second cup of coffee and leaned against the counter and watched his daughter eat. And the deed hung on the wall behind them both, quiet and particular, and finally in the right place. He was still drinking his coffee when she finished her toast and climbed down from her chair and picked up her backpack and said she was ready. He put the cup down. He picked up Cog and handed him to her. He zipped her coat.